Hi everyone, today's video is all about how to make Play-Doh using only 3 ingredients. Now, what I'm going to get you to do ahead of time is to measure out the following ingredients and then have them in front of you and ready to go. So right now I have half a cup of flour. So again, that's 1/2 cup of flour. I have a 1/4 cup of salt, a 1/4 cup of salt, and a 1/4 cup of water, okay? And then on the side here, I have my food coloring of the color that I'm gonna make my Play-Doh. What I also have in front of me back here that I don't think you can see is I just have additional water and additional flour in case I need it, okay? So this is all you're gonna need, plus a wooden spoon and a bowl. So let's get started. You're gonna take your 1/2 cup of flour and put it into your bowl. I'm going to add my 1/4 cup of salt, my 1/4 cup of salt, and I'm gonna mix it together. If you want to make a lot of Play-Doh, you can actually double this recipe by using 1 cup of flour, 1/2 cup of salt, and 1/2 cup of water. But I'm just making a smaller amount. But you can absolutely make more by doubling the recipe. Okay, so I have these mixed together. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to add in the water gradually. So a little bit at a time, and I'm gonna mix between each addition. So again, this is a 1/4 cup of water. The reason I'm adding it in gradually is because I may not need all of it. So you can see it's starting to form a dough-like texture here. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Now, eventually it's going to be easier to just mix using your hands. Okay, so I'm gonna add the rest of my water. We're really starting to get a Play-Doh-like texture now. Almost like a dough. Okay, you see how now I have a dough-like texture here? I'm actually gonna start going in with my hands. And for me personally, the dough is a little bit sticky, so I'm gonna add in a little bit more flour. Now, I want you to add whatever you think you need based on the texture you want, okay? So just now my dough was a little bit too sticky for my liking, so I added a little bit more flour. So let's see what we have here. So now I have more of a Play-Doh type texture here, but I'm gonna add just a tad bit more flour because for me, it's still a little bit too sticky. And I'm actually just gonna use my hands now to incorporate my flour until I get the texture I like. So again, it's totally based on the kind of texture that you want your Play-Doh to be. Okay, as I'm kneading it kind of in my hands, I'm really starting to like the texture that I have here. As you can see, I have like a ball of dough. It's not too sticky and it's not too dry either. So that's actually perfect. I'm gonna set my bowl aside. Okay, so now that you have your ball of Play-Doh, there's a couple things that you can do from here. So if you wanted, you can stop here and not add any food coloring, And what you can actually do, I'm going to show you an example by taking off a piece of my Play-Doh. What you can actually do is you can make shapes out of your Play-Doh and bake it in your oven to make it permanent. So for example, I'm gonna take a star cookie cutter and I'm gonna cut a little star. If I wanted this star to be permanent, I could actually bake it in the oven on a piece of parchment paper for 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours, okay? So yes, you heard that correctly. That's 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours. That way, your star will become permanent and it will actually just become hard. A lot of people like to make ornaments out of Play-Doh by baking it. You can do that easily by taking a toothpick and poking a hole in anywhere in the star that you'd like. And then you can actually, once it's done baking, you can actually paint it afterwards any color you want. You could add glue and glitter. You could do tons of fun things by doing that, by baking it in the oven for 2 to 3 hours at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. But for me personally, I would like to color my Play-Doh, but I just thought that I would give you the option if you would like to make it permanent. Okay, so this next step is really important. I'm just gonna have my ball of Play-Doh down here. I'm gonna make an indent with my thumb at the top of my Play-Doh, okay? So I just made a little indent here. And I'm actually gonna take my blue food coloring, that's the color that I'm gonna make my Play-Doh. I'm just gonna add 1 drop because a little goes a long way. Now, it's really important that you do this on a surface that's not going to stain because food coloring does stain. And another good idea is to use gloves. Otherwise, your hands might actually get food coloring all over them. So you can use any type of glove you'd like, anything that you're okay with getting stained. You can use latex gloves, cleaning gloves, anything that you're okay if it gets stained. So using my gloves, I'm actually going to now mix in my food coloring with my gloves here. So as you can see, the blue is starting to come through, and you can absolutely add as much food coloring as you want, but I always like to just start with a little bit so that my color isn't too strong. I'm going for more of a light blue. So I'm just gonna use my hands, squish my Play-Doh lots. Okay, so right now I have a light blue Play-Doh, but I would actually like to add some more coloring. So I'm gonna add a couple more drops. And again, this part is totally up to you. You can add as much food coloring or as little food coloring as you'd like. And yes, food coloring, it can stain. So just be aware of that if you're not using gloves, that it might be tricky to wash off the food coloring from your hands if you're not using gloves. Okay, so this is now a bit darker from what I had before. Okay, So now I have a bit of a darker blue here, as you can kind of see. It's still pretty light, so I'm gonna add some more. I do recommend starting with a little bit and then adding more as you go. That way you can really make sure that you get the color that you want out of your Play-Doh. So just using your hands to do this, to incorporate the color. I think that's all the food coloring that I'm going to add because I'm very happy with this color that I've created here. Once it gets to the point where the food coloring is pretty mixed in, I'm actually just gonna take off my gloves because the food coloring is pretty mixed in here now. Okay, now I am left with a light blue ball of Play-Doh, and that's exactly what I wanted. So this kind of Play-Doh only lasts up to 4 weeks because of what it's made out of. Because it's just flour, salt, and water, it's not going to last for a very, very long time. So absolutely store it in a Ziploc bag or a jar if you can to make it last longer. And then of course, as I showed you earlier, you can cut out different shapes and you could create your own shapes. And then as long as you bake it in the oven at 200 degrees for 2 to 3 hours, it becomes permanent what you made, okay? And another important step is if you would like to do that, try and flip your shape over at the halfway point. For example, if you're keeping it in for 2 to 3 hours, at the 1 hour mark, I would go in and flip my object or whatever you made upside down to make sure that both sides bake nice and evenly. Okay, and again, this recipe made about a good size handful of Play-Doh. If you would like to make more, you can double the recipe by using 1 cup of flour, half a cup of salt, and half a cup of water, okay? It's very easy to double the recipe if you'd like to make more. And of course, you can split your Play-Doh into 2 different balls of dough if you wanted to make more than one color. But for me, I wanted to make my entire batch of Play-Doh a nice light blue. Okay, so just remember to store it in a container or in a bag, and it only lasts up to 4 weeks maximum with this type of Play-Doh. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please send me pictures of what you made, and I'd love to see it. See you next week.